First, a little context. The year is 2006. Ultraman Max is the latest entry in the long-running Ultra series, and what it did more overtly than shows of the past decade was make direct callbacks to the franchise's Showa era. But it was played relatively safe. Only the first 3 shows were paid tribute, the most mainstream and culturally relevant ones. With Tsuburaya Productions on the verge of a corporate buyout after years of poor planning and bad management, the company would greenlight a new show that doubled down on nostalgia. Not only were the cuts deeper, but the story would be a direct continuation of the Showa timeline. But despite how specific the references can be, perhaps this new show's true accomplishment is just how accessible it is. This is Ultra Retrospective, and it's finally time to talk about Ultraman Mebius. Produced as the centerpiece of Ultraman's 40th anniversary, Mebius was a celebration. Callbacks and references are aplenty, but how does it all stack up? Is Mebius only valuable for the tribute it pays to the past, or is it good in its own right? That's what I hope to figure out here today. This is easily one of the most requested shows for me to look at, but I wanted to wait until I finished my coverage of the first 8 live-action Ultra series before I did it, because it just felt right. I'll keep spoilers to a minimum. I'll have a section for them towards the end of the video. But let's waste no more time. Here's an overview. It's been 25 years since the end of Ultraman 80, and the world hasn't seen a single monster attack. Until now. The hero is Mirai Hibino, a promising young Ultra recently promoted to man status, who's ordered to protect the Earth and learn about humans. He's characterized as a bit of a weirdo, very socially stunted. He is an alien after all. But he's a boundless source of optimism, always the first to leap into action. Mirai's an odd protagonist, but I like him. He's also got a secret, but I'll save that for later. His Ultraman form, Mebius, has a fun look. He's got the red and silver colors found in most Ultras of the Showa era, and the sleeker stylings of Ultraman from the Heisei era. A healthy marriage of the new and old. As for the name, it's kind of a mangling of the way Mobius is said in Japanese. The Mobius strip is a recurring motif for Mebius for that reason.
Ultraman Mebius.
The show's attack team is a culmination of all previous ones, and it has one of the most tortured abbreviations yet. GUYS. Guards for Utility Situation. Yeah, we're going with that. Mirai quickly joins GUYS. In fact, he's the first new member after all but one survives the monster attack in the first episode, and it's his involvement that gets the rest of the team assembled. What unfolds is something very familiar, but unlike prior attempts at recapturing the simplicity of the golden Showa era, Mebius's additions like its commitment to character and story arcs, and its core theme of friendship, make this one of the franchise's most unabashedly positive entries.
Yay! Yeah!
Supporting characters include Georgie, a football player who speaks a lot of Spanish. His kicks are so strong that they set the ball on fire. That's not just a visual gag, it really is going that fast. Marina is a sharpshooter who also maxed out perception during character creation. She's also got sick motorcycling skills. Ryu is the team's hothead. He's the only surviving member from the previous lineup, so he takes some time getting used to the cast Mirai assembles. His favorite activity includes reciting the mantra from the end of Return of Ultraman, and his second favorite activity is screaming. Teppei is a giant nerd who also gets to live his dream job of giving kaiju facts. God, I wish that were me. Konomi is adorable, and the show is bad whenever she's sad.
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
And then there's the captain, who's certainly a captain. He's low-key the dad of the team and instinctively knows when something's up, but there isn't a lot to him. The only character in the supporting cast I straight up don't like is the aide. He's always making silly faces and trying too hard to be funny, like me. They do try to give this guy pathos, but he's just a drag on the team's dynamic. His assistant is funnier than him without even trying. This asshole even strangles baby Ella King. This guy's the real monster, they should be fighting him every week. Brushing that under the rug, this is a well-rounded yet simple ensemble, and it's the way the show explores the hidden dimensions of these characters that helps make this one of the more likable attack teams in the franchise.
Guys, Sari, go!
GIG. They keep saying GIG. What's that an abbreviation of? Guys in green. I mean, I get the military reference, but they're not exactly wearing green? I've also found that can mean God is good, greed is good, get in gear, and get it going. Those last two fit, so that's probably what it actually is. Mebius isn't the only Ultra in town. The mysterious Space Knight Tsurugi shows up and is the focus of the show's first arc. Yeah, I don't really consider this one a spoiler. The show tries to play off the fact that he's an Ultra as a twist, but it's pretty obvious. His actual name is Ultraman Hikari, and he becomes an on-again, off-again side character. Kind of prefer his mask look, but yeah, this guy rocks. Mebius one-ups Max by not just bringing back monsters from the first two shows, but ones from the rest of the Showa era too. Even Doragori. I mean, Dragori. Yeah, the monster names are as inconsistent as ever. You can tell the current streaming services and Mill Creek are using the earlier translation because they call Choju Super Beasts, instead of the clunky, terrible -monsters translation used in the Ultraman Ace release. I've said it before, but Super Beast is so much better. They even turned Eleking into the show's unofficial mascot character, like Pamu from Ultraman Dyna. I don't care if it's transparently an attempt to sell more toys with a baby, it's cute. Every classic season has a monster rep or two here, alongside Mebius' own lineup of newbies. Some pretty cool newbies too. My favorite is Zamshar because I guess because he's just really cool. I don't know, it's not that deep. Even the capsule monsters make a comeback, joining Guys' arsenal and proving themselves to actually be slightly competent. It's not much, but it makes for a good couple episodes. It's better than how Dan used them. Something I really like about this show's approach to bringing back older monsters is the twists it gives them. Here we learn Twintail is actually an aquatic creature. That's why he's built like that. Sadara took a bite of gum-gum fruit, so now he has stretchy arms. Maruchi has evolved into Zoa Maruchi. Gomora and Red King are infected, so it makes them transform into each other. Aliens like Guts and Temperer get spicy new redesigns for the movie too. The list goes on. I think Mebius has the best approach to bringing back old monsters. It was before it got really tiresome. I've got to champion these more unique scenarios with them while I still can. Ultraman Mebius has a running narrative happening alongside the usual Monster of the Week format. It's not something the show follows religiously like Nexus, where the drama is more involved and serious and flows between episode to episode, but the bigger plot is happening in the background and it gets more prominent as the show's arcs reach their conclusions. Mebius' story isn't one of its strong points, honestly. As much as I root for shows with narratives, I found parts of this one to be a slog because it feels like it's revisiting ideas so often. It doesn't always compel. I kind of prefer when it has one-off episodes, when they're almost completely disconnected from whatever's happening in the background and the show is able to tell these classic-style Ultraman stories with its more distinct cast. Like the stuff with Bogal, I don't care. A standalone episode where Mirai has to train under Gen Otori, that's more like it. It's about halfway through after the movie where I think the show finds a nicer balance on story and one-off adventures. This is really more of a problem that Mebius has early on. Tsuburaya went all out for this one. The sets, the miniatures, the digital effects, it's some of the most bombastic yet. Really, it's the last time they were able to get this bombastic. The show's pacing takes after Ultraman Max's too. There's a lot more quick cutting and snappy camera work. No ending theme too. It leaves more room for the episode to breathe. Naturally, the digital effects in this Japanese show from the mid-2000s aren't as strong as the practical ones, but it's still some of the best seen yet. They've graduated from PS1 FMVs to PS3 graphics. In the very first scene, they attempt to depict Father of Ultra with a moving mouth. They stopped doing it because I think they realized it was creepy as hell. There stopped being new Ultra mouth movements, I mean. They still use this clip for every "Goran no Suponza no tekyo de okurishimasu" segment. They even care about bringing in details that only super nerds would notice, like the old stock explosion sound effect. Mebius's tone is pretty flexible, unlike something like, say, Ultraman Leo, which crashes back and forth between goofball kitty crap and insanely violent. Mebius hits this sweet spot where it's able to effectively weave in and out of goofball hijinks and taking itself seriously. The show's goofier episodes are where my patience is tested a little. I love Big Silly, more so with the monsters than the people now that I think about it. But when moments are accompanied by stock boingy sound effects and the characters are mugging at the camera, I can't help but check out. It's part of why I don't like the Aide. He's a character who's just there for the kids. Nothing gets as bad as the Alien Shemaya episodes from Max. But it's just that this show sometimes goes too far in the goofballery for me. It's better when it doesn't involve the Aide at least.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Like this scene with Windham, I like it. I like it a lot. It's funny when the monsters are silly. That's what I've come to expect. I mean this observation as a compliment. Mebius is basically a live-action anime. Complete with mid-episode flashbacks, too. There's a maid character named Moe-san. This show really leans into the burgeoning anime culture boom of the late 2000s. You know that gag in TV shows where a character sneezes when someone's talking about them far away? Believe me, if you've never noticed it before, you'll start noticing it now. Yeah, there's a lot of it in Ultraman in general, but I think this show has the highest concentration of it.
Safe.
This is the first time Tsuburaya has really embraced their past to this extent. They're fully committing to the Showa era existing as a linear timeline, with characters referencing past events and said events even getting follow-up episodes. This is unfortunately an aspect of the show where your mileage may vary, depending on how much of the Ultra franchise you've seen and what your tolerance for Red King is. For me, it's aged a little poorly, mainly because in the year 2024, I think the reverence for the Showa era has gotten stale. This is an unfair thing to pin to Mebius, but this is called Ultra Retrospective. I know I format these as reviews, but my experiences are painted by what I've seen since this show, so I have to address it. There's a ton of merit to how Mebius approaches its legacy. The tribute episodes can be very good on their own. Hell, there are ways future shows pay tribute to the past that I like too. But Mebius did incentivize showing the same handful of monsters over and over and over again, because their toys sold well and I can't help but be mean about it. If you're not an Ultraman fan, this may seem like a weird thing to complain about, but let me put it in Godzilla terms. It's like how Ghidorah and Mothra keep showing up when there's a whole gallery of monsters waiting in the wings who could have been there instead. I like Ghidorah, I like Mothra, much in the same way I like Gomora and Zeton, but when they're the only ones you see, the various entries they're in start to bleed together. Also, like, Gomora peaked in Mega Monster Battle. Every subsequent appearance pales in comparison. The heart of the issue isn't that the monster is appearing again, but that every new appearance runs the risk of making them another B-lister. Sure, Satura isn't very special. You can get away with having them appear again. Mebius even does something fun with them. But when it's a monster from an actually memorable episode, that's when repeated use is an issue. Zeton has a reputation for being the only kaiju the original Ultraman could never beat, yet almost every reappearance has deconstructed that narrative. Very few times convey the gravitas that entails. Even supposedly stronger forms of Zeton get turned into B-listers. This happens a lot actually, it's not just Zeton. The final bosses of new shows are jobbers now too. It just devalues the monster's presence. Mebius is a little guilty for normalizing this because of how Birdon was handled. What used to be a comically strong threat with a kill streak lasting 3 episodes gets dealt with in a single one. It's excusable on some level because Guys has to work together with Mebius, and it reinforces the show's themes, but I can't help but notice it when, 7 years later, Ultraman X treats the kaiju the same way. None of its predecessors do the original murder turkey justice. If you're gonna bring a big-name monster back, it helps to write a good episode around them, which thankfully does still happen. While Mebius got it right for the most part, it did unfortunately set a precedent. Once again, your mileage varies. I remember being thrilled during the first viewing of Mebius because it was the first time monsters like Mukadender and Nova were appearing in years. It was exciting. This also takes place in the original timeline. I think the direct references are justified and encouraged. Formation Yamato, an episode set in the monster graveyard, a passing reference to the Marucci incident. Can you believe I censored that in the Ace review? Mebius's virtual Zeton fight is a shot-for-shot recreation of the first Ultramans.
Ultraman Mebius.
They even dedicate an episode to the guy who built every attack vehicle, wondering what was in the water at the time he designed the Zat vehicles. This is an element of the show that benefits from watching 300+ episodes of 50-year-old superhero shows, but the viewing experience isn't reliant on knowing all these references. They're sprinkled into stories that still work without them. You don't need to have seen all the episodes with the father of Ultra to understand a story about an absent dad trying to make time for his kid. I don't regret knowing what I know. I'm happy to be an Ultraman fan. Yet it's just neat that the show doesn't forget to have an emotional core that works irrespective of how much of a nerd you are. And while this is more overtly a show that pays tribute to a specific era of the past, it also represents the leaps and bounds made to the Ultra format during the Heisei era. Gaia's approach to storytelling, Max's exciting episode pacing, Cosmos' goo goo gaga baby humor. This show pulls a lot from its contemporaries. Hikari being a blue rival Ultra also brings to mind Agul from Gaia, though Hikari is nowhere near the asshole that guy was. I mean that affectionately. I guess Hikari did steal someone's body. That's pretty abhorrent. Probably more abhorrent than anything Agul did, but I'll talk about that later.
Nani?
You know that stereotype about Japanese shows and the characters winning with the power of friendship? Well, Mebius is that show. You'll be hard-pressed to find one more earnest about it. The message is in the theme song. You'll be hearing the entire thesis of the show at least 50 times. If I were more cynical, and you know I am because I make YouTube videos, I'd say that this show can be too sentimental. In fact, I'm going to say it, it can be too sentimental. There was a point where I stopped taking notes every time an episode cut to a flashback or the character came to some epiphany about their motivations. The characters are also clashing all the time in the first half. Sure, it's to build relationships and to show that not everything is peachy, but it gets pretty repetitive. And not in the entertaining, formulaic way that Ultraman can be. It's more like, God, not this again. You know they're gonna kiss and make up later anyways. But that's kind of the nice thing about Mebius. No matter how bad the situation is, there's always that optimism. There aren't many Ultraman shows where you get the sense that the characters won't return to being friendly with each other. Mebius is no exception, but there's just something about how it all comes together that makes the friendship its characters share so endearing. While the two couldn't be any more different on a tonal level, the general theme of bonds was actually carried over from Ultraman Nexus. That one took a more melodramatic approach, in a good way. The characters were going through tough situations, but if they actually came out the other end alive, it was because of an emotional anchor, a bond. Mebius reinforces the whole power of friendship message through a different lens. Obviously, by being more lighthearted, it's not going to the same places Nexus did. I find Nexus to be the more effective of the two, because the established stakes and de-emphasized status quo always had me hooked to see what happened next. I just find it more compelling. But there is something to appreciate about how Mebius doesn't always put its characters in the most dire situations, and lets the conflicts be more mellow. Its total and complete confidence in its presentation and tone, how the message is so simple. When that darn instrumental version of the Mebius theme from Gaia composer Toshihiko Sahashi starts playing, It makes me pump my fist in the air. I'm definitely not tearing up a little, and I think, hell yeah, Friends. The positivity this show radiates is infectious. It's very earnestly about the power of friendship, and there's something kind of beautiful about a show that's so unambiguously about that.
僕は一人なんかじゃない。心はいつも仲間たちとつながっているんだ。
Time to talk about some highlights. This is going to double as the big, scary spoiler section. The Showa era had a lot of stories about comets or rogue planets on a crash course with Earth. So Mebius's approach to this admittedly very tired concept is a rapidly edited, delightfully cheesy, and extremely stylized episode featuring the badass alien samurai Zamushar.
この星がどうなろうが俺には関係ない。
I like how Mirai is immediately onto Alien Babalu's identity fraud crap. There's been enough fake Ultramen by now to know that something's up when one of them starts attacking the city. They even mentioned the Astra incident from Leo. The other characters aren't sure yet, and that's the conflict of the episode. There's some surface level but meaningful commentary in there about prejudices. The characters even go, "We've never had a blue Ultraman before. Maybe this one's evil," which is a little odd as a metaphor to be honest, but I like how they made a little story reconciling with Hikari's behavior from earlier in the series.
人間は所詮相手を外見で判断する弱く愚かな生き物に過ぎん。
Okay, pessimist. This isn't Ultra 7. You can actually be proven wrong here. Another highlight is the episode with the mom. She gets possessed by alien serpent, but eventually overcomes its consciousness by thinking about her huge family. Like, oh my god, that's a lot of kids. With Ultra 7 being a recent memory because I just did a video on it, just as in like 4 to 3 months ago, it's nice to have an alien possession episode that doesn't end tragically. It's super charming too.
みんなも車には気をつけるんだよ。
Was kind of taken aback by the gang immediately assuming this middle schooler Mirai brought back to the base was his girlfriend. Do they really think that little of him to assume he's hey, Georgie, stop that! There's a nice little moment in this episode where Mirai implies that it was Hideki Go's friendship with Jiro that gave the Ultra Brothers their favorite Japanese word, Kyodai, sibling, saying that they started using it as a way of connecting to the Earth. It's just a sweet explanation is all. There is kind of a running theme throughout the original seasons too, that people can be better and the Ultramen were just there to help. Glad that got retained here. This little girl alien was totally in the right to teleport the 8 away, for the record. She should have left him there.
ペンギンとアザラシが見えた。
I don't think every instance of Mebius following up an old episode works. The Marucci one is a mixed bag. The original was from Return of Ultraman, and it was about this kid being adopted by an alien and seeing some pretty vile discrimination. It was a surprising allegory for xenophobia, how the Japanese can treat foreigners and even their own neighbors if there's even a suggested connection to the outside. It's also got a dog explosion. Mebius's follow-up posits the same questions, and iterates on them.
いい宇宙人か悪い宇宙人かなんて見ただけじゃわかんないわけだし。
The takeaway here is that the next generation can be more accepting than the last. But there was a raw, genuine anger that came off in that original episode that made its message more potent. It's just not as effective here with this show's more sentimental tone and theatrical presentation. It doesn't do anything for me as a sequel to such a memorable episode. There's an episode where a scientist lady visits the base and implants herself with a false memory to trick Yapul into summoning Dorigori. This isn't even one of the better ones, I just wanted to commit that word salad to a sentence. You know how you can tell with some characters that you're gonna like them right away? Isana's one of those. There's actually a really cool sequence in this episode where he's dodging the monster's attacks, and it's animated by the artist who did the visual effects for Ultraman the Next, which explains why it goes insanely hard.
よろしく。
Mebius addresses the frankly odd way some Ultramen go about blending in on Earth, and it's done in an interesting way. Here's how it's been defined in the past. 1. An Ultra fuses with a human, but they're still separate beings. 2. The Ultraman fuses with a human protagonist, but the line between the two blurs over time, and by the end of the show they're the same person. Freaky alien assimilation, essentially. 3. The Ultra creates a human persona for themselves so that they're unambiguously the same character from start to finish. Number 4 is whatever the hell Ultraman Taro did, where he's the same person but he also isn't, but he is, but he isn't. That type is just called inconsistent writing. Mebius takes the third option, but the show addresses this human persona in a way that makes for an interesting couple episodes. He based his appearance off the dead son of a guy's officer, but unlike Ultra 7 getting away with identity theft, the show points out how weird this is, revealing the kind of effect it would have on someone if some alien showed up saying he's paying tribute to their deceased son. Mirai's ultimately a good guy, and he doesn't know anything about human customs, so he offers to stop using this form because he's upset that he offended the guy. But then he gets permission. I don't know, it's bittersweet. Just a cool approach to addressing Ultra ethics.
ヒロトなら私の胸の中で生きている。君の人生を生きるんだ。僕の人生を。
Earlier in the show, we get an example of how not to do this. Hikari represents the worst possible way for an Ultra to blend in. Instead of basing his appearance off of anyone or asking if he can share the body, he straight up stole someone. Hikari has to atone for his behavior later, and it's a good character beat. Man, Leo and 80 remain the only Showa Universe Ultramen to have original human forms that they didn't plagiarize. Godspeed. One really smart way the show mixes its big thesis on friendship with established Ultra conventions is how the team reacts to the truth.
Mebius.
30 episodes in, the gang finds out that Mirai is Mebius, and you know what happens next? They're cool with it. In fact, the show continues for another 20 episodes. That's kind of nuts. The precedent so far is that an Ultraman needs to leave immediately after being found out. But because this one established that bonds and relationships are kind of a big deal, that's enough justification to let Mirai stay. Never did understand that, by the way, why Ultramen need to leave when they're found out. I always assumed it was a code of conduct, or the same reason why Spider-Man needs to keep his identity secret. The villains would know who his friends are. But here it's like, yeah, you know who me and my friends are. Try us. He also has the literal power of friendship, and it gives him a new form. He has the friggin' fire symbol that he gave to his friends on his chest. It's wholesome and hype. It's also kind of genius. You can do more with the team dynamics when they know one of their own is Ultraman.
未来君はあの時光線を撃つつもりだったの。その結果によってミサさんが死ぬかもしれなかったのに。
One of my favorite moments in the show is the reveal that Isana knew Mirai was Mebius, and it was because the team had their cockpit radio on. Couldn't have had that moment if the status quo hadn't changed. The Ultramen of previous shows are here too. This was before they established the multiverse thing, so Jonius isn't invited. It's really cool, getting to see where these characters ended up all these years later. Watching these episodes during my first viewing of the series was a real treat. Leo's back and cooler than ever. I like that the real point of this episode is that in the modern age, it's okay to ask for help. Maybe if Gen had a team as competent as Guy's, he would have been less miserable. Now that's generational trauma. Dan Moriboshi's back, rocking a cowboy fit for some reason. I mean, it's cool, I'll take it. No explanation for how he came back from the dead, by the way. It's probably in a magazine somewhere. Yamato returns for the real finale to Ultraman 80. This one's a real tearjerker. I talked about it in depth in the 80 video. Hideki Go comes back for an episode. It still doesn't feel right that actor Jiro Dan is gone for real. Once again, rest in peace. Hokuto and Minami meet and become ace one more time, and it's It's just so sweet. I'm so happy that we got a proper resolution to the slap in the face that was the plot twist in that show.
本当にお久しぶり。
Hayata gets to appear in the most effective of these cameo episodes, where Mebius is trapped in an existential nightmare where roles are reversed. It's fun.
侵略者の肩を持つのか。
メフィラスの言葉は絶対なんだから。
敵に決まってんだろ。
Curiously, the only missing host here is Kotaro. I respect the reasons the actor had for not being able to return to the show, but regardless, nearly 20 years removed, there's a Kotaro-shaped hole here that's hard to ignore. They do have the voice actor for Taro from Ultraman's story, and that's how it's been ever since. Thing is, I didn't really like Ultraman's story, so this gesture doesn't really do anything for me. It's cool, but I would have liked it if Kotaro was there instead.
ローストチキンだ。
Oh yeah, there's a movie I should probably talk about. It takes place after episode 26, and it's about the original 4 Ultra Brothers returning to Earth. There's a council of aliens plotting to destroy Mebius. The brothers regain their powers, Taro and Zafi show up, Mebius gains a form I don't think he ever uses again because it requires fusing with the other Ultras. It's all sentimental and celebratory, but it's basically an extended episode of the show with higher production values. Leo isn't in it, what's even the point? Jokes aside, the only things you're missing by not watching this is a pretty banger ending theme, and footage from the actual highlight of the movie. It's from an event celebrating the 40th anniversary. Every Ultraman is here, it's really cute. They all dressed up in suits for it. I still tear up a little at the montage. It really gives this journey of mine some perspective. There's not much else I can say about the movie, but this is what renewed public interest in Mebius. Rather, it made the public aware it was even a tribute series in the first place. The ratings struggled until now. Some of the better episodes happened in this latter half too, so the movie was really the boost the show needed. It also creates a talking point for me to jump off of. There's this idea that originates from Buddhism, the 4 heavenly kings. As a trope used in fiction, it's basically when there are 4 super strong characters who represent a final obstacle for the hero, before the real threat. If you've ever played a Pokemon game, that's what the Elite Four is. I bring up this concept because I enjoy that Mebius felt the need to use it twice, in both the show and the movie. I love seeing the aliens put their brains together to figure out how to mess with Mebius. Well, it's less like the second group is actually helping each other and more like they're going in one at a time.
次は俺の出番だ。
すでにデスラムが向かった。
なんだと？
The Mephiles that appears towards the end of the series is the coolest this character will be until Shin.
俺が倒れても偉大なる皇帝に仕えた四天王はまだ3人残っている。
So, who is this great emperor? This is Mebius's deepest cut. I can't believe they actually do this. See, way back in Ultraman Taro, the Land of Light was first shown in the 25th episode. Back then it was a bunch of scrap metal and blinking lights. In the same episode, we also get a rundown on the planet's history. Father of Ultra fought in a great war against an army of monsters led by this mysterious figure. They gave him the regal name Alien Emperor. But like many things in Taro, it's brought up once and never mentioned again. They seemingly forgot about it. Until now. That's right, Mebius made a throwaway character only mentioned once in a 32-year-old episode, the final boss of the series. That's so f***ing cool. This is a fantastic finale. I like how supporting characters and plot elements return for the final battle. It's like the ending of Tiga on steroids.
見ているかエンペラ星人。これが我々が紡いできた絆だ。
Yay, themes! Its payoffs feel earned. Every piece of Heisei building stock footage ever shot gets blown up. The drama is great, there's some beautifully somber moments, the stakes are high, and the hype is real. You know it's good when even the aid has a rare moment of compassion. This is one of the most satisfying endings Ultraman has ever had. All of this is to say that I think Ultraman Mebius is good. Yeah, I liked it. It's occasionally great, and what it represents, as the last piece of evidence that Tsuburaya used to have money, matters more than how I feel about it. But, I don't know, it's not one of my all-time favorites. parts of the show don't hold up for me. The tone doesn't always match my preferences for the Ultra series. A little too kiddie for my liking. It could have been Burnout, but it took me a while to get through this one because I wasn't always feeling it. Once again, most of my apprehensions are with that first half. It has some good episodes, but the sentimentality wasn't always doing it for me. If I had to pit any other show against it, I prefer Max. The overall foundation of Mebius is stronger, the soundtrack and the production values are a little better, its cast was built to go through story and character arcs, and I think they're more memorable for it. Mebius also doesn't have Alien Shimea, but Max's simpler approach led to a stronger batting average, it just has a higher concentration of good episodes. The best parts of Mebius aren't as good as the best parts of Max. That's my hot take. Except for how Mebius's ending comes together, that's pretty fantastic. I can't say either of them aren't good. In fact, I'd recommend both equally as a starting point. The classic Ultraman absurdity is here, and I couldn't be happier. The action is exciting, as was the standard at the time, and there's no denying that I did feel my heartstrings being pulled. It does click when it needs to. I'm not invincible. It's just a nice show about friendship and teamwork. I love that it's so upfront with its motives. It's an enjoyable love letter to the Showa timeline, and an excellent crash course of what to expect for newcomers. To answer the question at the start, yes, it is worth seeing. So, that was it. The show finished airing. Bioplanet Wu also aired around the same time and probably drained some cash too. Really gotta look at this if it ever gets translated. The bottom line, Tsuburaya Productions had no money left and was in billions of yen in debt. So with bankruptcy seemingly inevitable, ownership of the company was transferred from the Tsuburaya family, and when the dust finally settled, its new owners were Bandai and later Fields. These two have owned the company to this very day. So, what happened next? The Ultra series entered a short period of dormancy. Not quite the dark age it had endured in the 80s, but the shows that were coming out were experimental in format. Mega Monster Battle being a video game adaptation, and Ultra 7X aiming for a much older audience. There were a lot more theatrical movies like the Superior 8 Ultra Brothers, and the ones starring Ultraman Zero. Of course, there were specials like Armored Darkness that picked up where Mebius's finale left off, and side stories like the ones following Hikari that released during and after the show's run. Good old Mebi appeared in a number of movies, but after that he kinda faded into the background. He hasn't disappeared, but he also hasn't completely dipped like his human form. It's quite sad, actually, if any of it is true. I'll try not to sensationalize. The video from last year where Mirai's actor Shunji Igarashi talks about it was privated. Based on translations, Igarashi got screwed over by his agency and was getting paid less than every other actor he worked alongside with. Horrible if true. What is an objective fact is that Igarashi retired in 2013, so Mebius has been voiced by someone else ever since, which I guess explains his spotty appearances. The show is 2 years away from being half the age of the Ultra series when it started airing. I think a comeback would create a reaction so positive it blows a hole in the ozone layer. And that's what defines Mebius's legacy, the love for it. Comment sections are flooded with support. I can attest to that since I get ones asking when this review is coming out under my other videos. It's something I see with a lot of Heisei entries because they came out during the age of the internet, so it's only natural that they'd be the ones most new fans have seen first. It may not be my absolute favorite, but I totally see why it is for so many others. Mebius is just oozing positivity, and it's the gateway for a much larger universe. While I am in the camp of, yeah, the show is good, I'm glad something as big and celebratory as Mebius exists. To date, it's the last 50-episode season, and with the state of budgets at Tsuburaya, I really don't see something like this happening again. That's what makes Mebius so special. It has that visible production value. It was in a position where it could be as expensive as it wanted for the sake of going out with a bang. Thematics aside, it's why the main character is named Mirai. It translates to future. They wanted this show to be remembered. The later entries we got can be good too. In a couple ways, I think specific elements can even outperform Mebius. But it's never been a fair comparison. They're up against a show that knew it was on its way out and acted like it had nothing to lose. It really was the last of its kind. Mebius is good. Check it out. Man, that took a really long time. To put some perspective in when this video started production proper, it was March 2nd of this year, so right after I started working on the Ultra 7 video, and then some smaller projects happened in the interim. But yeah, thanks for making it to the end of the video, and a special thank you to all the patrons who held out despite my slow progress. And also a shout out to the top patrons: Old Metal Possum, Solid Lib, Dinosaurana, Kadorian, Scooter Jit, Mago Muddy, Chris Space Cowboy, Lobotomy Blues, Cool Bell Zero, Pack Jeff, Johnny Hedgewolf, Eric Guzda, Janos Firewalker, Easterman, Macho Mantis, Manila Fan, Sampai, Big Dumb Media, Navek 15, Jacob Hinch, Dude Bro, Alistair Gilmore, Seamus Kelly, Anonymous Euronymous 1349, Fujoshi Urinal, Grazio, Mulan Nguyen, Irrelevant 402, Krazak 53, Queer Kaiju, Chronicler Waba, Alcoholic Alligators, Ryan Santa Cruz, Avok Robot, The Antagonist, Godzilla Rich, It's God Z, An Actual Dimetrodon, CMG, Red Comet Harry, and Marpzilla. Thank you all very much. Also, here's a deleted scene. If it says anything about how well liked the character is, I went to the local Asian mart, and they were selling sparkling water with branded characters. The two Ultramen that were represented were Tiga and Mebius. So naturally, I had to do a taste test. Yep, that's certainly flavored water. This is like trying to pat your tummy while rubbing your head.